And again, it's this acknowledgement of monolatry, that B'nai Elohim aren't just Jewish or Israelite, right? The B'nai Elohim is a group of multiple gods in the Near East. They're Hittite and Amorite and Canaanite and Mesopotamian and Egyptian, and that's who these people are. And
well, I'm going to brag about my God. This is
Right.
about me being chosen, and I'm special.
And my God can kick your God's butt is basically how the ancient Near East was set up. I mean, that was monolatry. You acknowledged that there was multiple gods, and ours was just ours. It was, the idea of monotheism is a very late idea. So before that, we have polytheism and monolatry. First thing I think is important to remember is that the whole idea of the conquest is completely fiction, right? That's not how the Israelites moved into Canaan. Archaeological evidence suggests that it was very slow adaptation, like anything else, like immigration, and you get to know, and all of a sudden, here we are, right? There was no giant battles and scouts looking over and seeing giants and being scared. So if that's the point, then what are the authors trying to accomplish by making and embellishing this conquest story? It's not that they went and conquered everything. I mean, David was a thug. Historically, David went to a city and said, "Nice city you got here. Shame if something were happened to it, maybe you need protection." And then all of a sudden it's his, right? He was a jerk. But if you're writing about him later, they're like, yeah, but he slingshotted a giant in the face and no one else has done that. So it's
pretty cool.
Like, you get those, it's cool. It's like, he's a cool guy, probably bisexual. He had affairs and all this other stuff.
Oh, right. With Jonathan, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, they were super
I love
good
that
for
story.
each other.
Reason. Okay, so now why are they taking gods and trying to make gods look bad? Why are they doing that? What would be the purpose?
Well, you have to remember that the idea of B'nai Elohim, or just Elohim in general, originally meant plural, right? The divine council, multiple gods. Eventually, the monotheistic school was able to squish that down into angelic beings, or something else, or a plurality of God, or whatever it is. But the B'nai Elohim, B'nai Elohim, literally means like gods, right? B'nai could be sons, but it could also be people of. These were members of the godly council, or whatever it is. And we see this a bunch of times, right? We see it in Job 1:6, talking about the divine beings presented themselves before God. Yeah, absolutely. Job's badass.
It's a shit story, but it's a good story.
There's a bunch of divine beings that are hanging around God, and one of them is the adversary. And then in Psalm 82, right? My favorite Psalm, this is Yahweh's ascension to King of the Gods, or whatever it is.
Oh, yeah.
Out here, there's the Genesis Apocrypha.
Yeah, please do.
These are Aramaic writings that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. One of them is the Book of Jubilees, which people may have heard of from Apocrypha, but it's written between 3rd century BCE and 1st century CE. And they have this discussion on Nephilim. It says, "And against the angels whom God had sent upon the earth, God was exceedingly angry. And God gave commandment to root them out of all their dominion. And God bade us to isolate them in the depths of the earth. And behold, they are bound in the midst of them, and they are isolated. And against the children went forth a command from before God's face, that they should be smitten with the sword and be removed from under heaven. And God said, My spirit shall not always abide on man, for they are also flesh, and their days shall be 120 years, which we read also in Genesis 6.
Right.
And God sent a sword into their midst, that each should slay his neighbor. And they began to slay each other until they all fell by the sword and were destroyed from the earth. Awesome story, by the way.
Right.
But there's this, great, heartwarming. Yeah, but there's a myth that some people believed that Nephilim descended into the earth because they were not welcome on earth, right? And God got in there and said, kill each other. And that's what happened to them. So
that's rough.
So that's rough, but like, what a way to get rid of them, right? Someone had an answer to this question of what the heck happened to the Nephilim. We're not the first people to ask that. And someone said, well, I wrote this thing called Book of Jubilees. It's a pretty good book. And here's what happened. That either shows us that at least one person believed that, a bunch of people heard it. And it was part of that theology there, is that if you wanted to know what happened to Nephilim, read this book. And that gives an example. They're not here anymore because blank, right? Just like Psalm 82. If you want to know what happened to the rest of the gods, why there's only one God, it's because Yahweh killed them all.
I have to say that's some good writing.
It is.
When he's standing there and he's like, you are God. I don't know what he said. You are God's son of the Most High, but you will fall like men, something to that
Yeah.
extent. I mean, that just even saying that kind of gives me chills, even though I don't believe it. Like, I could imagine if I had a God who, in my opinion, just kind of castrated the rest of them, I'd be like, yeah, you were gods.
It's
Not more,
badass, right?
babes.
It's
Badass.
badass. And again, it's this acknowledgement of monolatry, that B'nai Elohim aren't just Jewish or Israelite, right? The B'nai Elohim is a group of multiple gods in the Near East. They're Hittite and Amorite and Canaanite and Mesopotamian and Egyptian, and that's who these people are. And that comes out a lot more in Dead Sea Scrolls than Torah. But yeah, I think it's important to remember that it wasn't just these characters, but people surrounded themselves. And that's how their tribe was built, right? Based on this God and the power of that God. And if your God gets beaten, or the victor writes that your God gets beaten, well, you see what happens, right?
Yeah, they kind of just fade into nothingness.
They do, into obscurity. That's right. Right.
What I would love to talk about, since you said you had it with you, is you mentioned something about, how do I say this? Connections between a divine person and a human person. How would they have how do I put this so I don't get kicked off of
you
YouTube?
Are speaking of celestial-terrestrial intermarriage.
Whew.
Yes. And all the fun that comes with it.
Because, we often wonder how orifices are the same. Like,
right.
You just wonder, do all the components work together?
Well, I think,
okay, maybe it's just me that wonders that, Mike.
No, I mean, I think the Greeks sort of took care of that for us, right? In Metamorphoses,
how does
right?
the plumbing work?
Right? Exactly. How does the plumbing work? And then, like, what happens? It's like Superman having sex with Lois Lane. Like, that's not going to end well. It's just like
blow the back of
exactly,
brain.
Exactly. Anyway,
better pull it out.
Yep. But even still, like, imagine the force,
right?
The power of those things,
No onanism. You might get in trouble by God, so you can't pull out.
Right.
But you might kill somebody.
Right. You might kill somebody. What a horrible choice.
Kill yourself or somebody else.
Right. Exactly. Well, I know where the gods chose, I think.
Yeah, sheesh.
But I think the Greeks took care of that, right? Because Zeus would always have to transform into something and, like, to impregnate someone and then come back and be like, no big deal.
Good point.
So I think they sort of had the same question. Greeks were, they were all up in that stuff. So they were just like, well, how'd the plumbing work? We're like, well,
dirty little Zeus, birdies, weren't they?
Right. And I think there is a story. I love it. There is a story in Metamorphoses about a woman telling Zeus, I want you to come at COME. Come to me as you are. Let's just calm down.
You are.
Yeah. As you are for real. And he's like, no, that's a bad idea. And she's like, no, I really want to. And it was like lightning. And he's like, all right. Whoever's got the pen is writing what happens to these mythical beings. But the truth is, they had to do something with them because they were part of that culture. You can't just ignore them. It didn't work that way.